following podcast is recorded and produced by Emerge, a media creators co-op, in affiliation with the network at bicbp-radio.com.
Hello there. Welcome to our third episode of the 716th Attack Legion episode. I got it right this time, guys. I don't know if you heard that.
716th.
Hey, that's the military in me.
Yeah.
Today's episode is the I don't like sand.
It's coarse and it's rough and irritating.
It gets everywhere.
It gets everywhere.
Yes, that is who I want to have my babies with.
Oh, and we're off.
That really got Padme, you know. Like.
So, today's episode, we're going to be talking specifically about the sequels, or not the sequels, I apologize, the prequels. My mind is all over the place because that's the order in which they came out, not in which the story itself. So, today we're talking about the prequel series, which will be Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, the best movie ever, and Revenge of the Sith.
They're really best.
Yeah.
No, it's the Clone Wars animated movie. It's the best.
Yeah, all right, you got me there. Best live action movie.
There you go. Now you're on target.
You got me there. So in today's episode, though, we're gonna be talking about, like I said, the prequels. I'm gonna kick it off by stating that I was, as stated in the earlier episode, I was about 7 when the prequels came out. You guys were barely a twinkle.
Yeah, we were like months old, right?
Yeah.
I was
1999. It was
December 1999, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was a year and 1 month.
So, okay. So you guys were, Star Wars wasn't really, that just happened. Star Wars wasn't really your guys' in your purview yet. It wasn't in your, down your road. So you guys could have been Trekkies for all we know.
we talked about this a bit in the last episode, and like it kind of dawned on me when we were actually talking about this in the last episode, that like I didn't realize how young I was when I watched the prequels.
Yeah.
Like I knew I was 5 or 6 when I watched the original trilogy, but like for whatever reason I thought I was much older when I watched the prequels, but I wasn't. I watched the original trilogy and then I watched the prequels right after it. So I was like, yeah, 5 or 6 when I watched the prequels.
I mean, I think I was the same. Again, I don't like have the most clear memory of like when I first watched any of these movies. If I'm being honest. I mean, when did I watch the prequels? You think? Like, did I watch the 1 and 2 right before the third one came out?
Leading up to the release of episode 3, so you could go see it in the theaters.
Okay.
Yeah, I was 4 when episode 2 came out. So by the time episode 2 came out, I had seen the 4 that came before it, and then episode 2 came out. I couldn't see it in the theater, and then when episode 3 came out, I went. You know, then by that point I was like 7, so we went and saw. Me and my dad went and saw it actually, and it was ironic too because my mom was the Star Wars fan. My dad, he likes Star Wars, and but he's very unemotional when it comes to movies. He's like, all right, I'll go see it because it's a movie and it's something to do. And he's like that about all movies. Whereas my mom is the nerd. We're going to go see every Star Wars movie, every superhero movie, every this, every that. And so there was a feud between them because my dad took me to see it first. My mom was pissed. She's like, you went and saw Star Wars 3 without me? And I was like,
that's how my family was with Harry Potter. Midnight release tickets the whole night. We would go out to dinner. And then we would go see the Harry Potter movies. And my dad got so mad.
Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban was the first movie I ever saw in a theater.
I think we saw all of
the best Harry
the
Potter.
first movie I saw in theaters was Finding Nemo.
That might be. Probably a Pixar thing, right?
I'm guessing.
I think
don't know.
maybe Incredibles or something like that.
Mission Incredible.
Nah.
But anyway,
Maybe Spider-Man.
Spider-Man's such a good movie.
Spider-Man, the original Spider-Man is a
And that will
is
be
good camp right there.
And that
Good
will be
camp.
on our next episode
Welcome
of the
back
Spider-Man
to the
podcast.
Spider-Man podcast.
yeah, the
Yeah,
Spider-Man.
we're not. So we're in the wrong universe here, guys.
My
So
favorite
let's,
movie is Spider-Man 2.
I know I was going to chime in, but I do remember one thing that happened is Lego Star Wars came out as a PC game. The first one.
love Lego
And
Star
so we were playing
Oh,
that on the
PlayStation 2.
computer, So that was 2005 before Revenge of the Sith came out. So definitely you had seen all
that is true.
the other two prequel movies by the time that game came out.
And that's crazy, too, to talk about really quick, that the Lego Star Wars game, the original Lego Star Wars game for PlayStation 2, was the first three movies, is episodes 1, 2, and 3, but it came out before episode 3 came out.
Yeah.
So did the
And then
episode
the
3
Revenge of the Sith video game came out, and they knew that it was going to come out before the movie, so they made the game in a way that there was two endings. And that is the one thing about that shocked me, was why on earth would they do that?
The same reason they did it when they released the episode 3 game. Because you got to appease the fans.
Yeah, but why would you put the
Also,
plot of the movie that hasn't been out
toys.
yet into a game? Yeah,
There
but
was a lot more in that game, though.
Capitalism.
Like there
there's
was
a lot of extra.
There was
there's
like
a lot
them
of extra.
exploring the General Grievous,
Venator.
the Venator.
There's all
Yeah.
sorts of extra stuff.
There's extra stuff. So
That
you
game
really
is
didn't
so
know.
long.
I mean,
Oh my god, it's
love
like
that game, though.
17 or 18 hours
So-
of story in that game.
But to kind of,
Oh yeah, we're doing a podcast. We have
We're-
questions
yeah.
to answer.
I love talking about video games. We can start a whole podcast on
I'm
just
sure we'll
video
get to
games.
a couple more because the prequel era does have a good number of
Oh,
prequel era video games. So if not some of the better games,
We can
associated.
do a
Yeah.
whole
So-
episode on just video games
So I'm
of
sure we'll
Star
get brought up
Wars.
again. Battlefront 2 especially.
But
That game,
I
the
That
original.
might be my
Love
favorite game of all
Battlefront
time.
2.
Battlefront 2. But we actually Jack and probably Jack had a PS2. I never had one. But we would go over to Jack's house and we would just play Battlefront 2 for like hours on end.
Exclusively.
Like, for years too. Like not even like for like we played it for 2 years after it came out. Like no. Like for like 6-7 years. Like that we played that game.
That was the first game I
even
played online.
well into like when the
We
PS3
do, like,
came out. Me and Christian would still
We'd
be
still
on
be
the
on the
PS2.
PS2 and be like, all right, time to go on to the
So-
PS2 and get down the 5-year-old game. Like it was like the one mode, like heroes versus villains. And
Always.
and we would just go right into that, and I would always be the dark side people, and it was like Boba Fett. I would always be Boba Fett because he was a pain in the ass to try and kill.
He was
and, like,
OP.
and I was good, and him and my brother would be all the Jedi characters or whatever, and I would just like go to the top of the little. There was like Pelimoto's like what's it called? The dock, like
Yeah.
the space dock, essentially. And I would just fly at the top of that, and I'd shoot them from far away.
Oh, it was
So they couldn't. I'd win because I was camping, and that would be it.
Camping before it was cool.
Yeah, exactly.
So, all right. So
All right, back on topic though. No
Back
more
on
video
Well, you
games.
mentioned Tatooine, so let's go to where the prequel started. Tatooine.
It's actually
Phantom Menace.
It actually starts on Naboo, but anyway.
It starts in space, but actually.
I'm gonna eat the sushi kiss and avoid
No,
the fact
I know what
that
you
you're
mean.
making a
I was
weird
trying
eye
to
contact
circle
with
it back. I was
Yeah,
just
I
trying
know.
to circle it back. Tried.
me. Get called out, sucker.
So, Phantom Menace. We talk about the blockade of Naboo, and we get introduced to the Great Negotiator.
Hello there.
Hello there.
You were right about one thing, Master. The negotiations were short.
Love it.
Quip
I love
God.
it.
Quip God Obi-Wan.
So, and we get introduced to arguably the grayest Jedi of the era, Qui-Gon Jinn.
Liam Neeson. A godsend.
I will find you, and I will kill you.
I have a very particular set of force
Fascinating.
skills.
Fascinating character. Not the smartest. It's like,
I think he
like-
let
yeah.
he let a lot of he didn't let a lot of things. Sorry, correcting myself. He didn't let a lot of things persuade him. He kind of just went with what his gut told him to do.
So, but I remember when Phantom Menace came out, I was young. Toys were huge. It was their re-release. Pod racing was huge. That was like one of those first things. And you know that was in there for toys.
Yeah.
But I loved it. But it
It
also
works, though.
shows that, you know, how Anakin's reflexes were. You get introduced to R2 for the first time, that he was just some random astromech. He wasn't the R2 that we knew and loved.
He wasn't the war criminal.
Yeah, I don't particularly like everyone's introduction, like for like legacy characters in the prequels, but R2's is it's just like, yeah, he got us out of the blockade by not dying when all the other ones died.
Yeah,
Like,
Yeah.
he's a
definitely-
badass droid. It's like,
Well, and so
He's protected by plot armor in that
yeah,
scene.
a little
It's
bit,
like,
but still,
it's like, here's
yeah,
that's exactly what it
is.
is. He's like, here's 5 R2D2 droids.
Hey, plot armor's
They're
not always
all
bad, you
exactly.
know?
I know, but it's so ironically like, here's 5
gotta
of
know
the
when to use
exact
it.
same droid, and ironically,
He's the better one,
They're
though.
like, this
He's the-
one has to be the smartest one because it has to be the. And it's not even that he's like the best droid of all of them. It's just he's just the only one that doesn't happen to get hit by a bullet.
Yeah, I always loved
So
that about
it's
R2.
like-
That like just for whatever reason, there's just always been like an acceptance. Like, yeah, R2, he's not technically better than anyone, but he is just because he has a better
I think
personality.
He's not better than anybody. He just has to make it to the
Yeah,
end.
exactly.
So-
I mean, he's
One of
saved
my
them so many times.
one of my favorite shots in the prequels is when they're escaping the blockade.
These are good.
And the captain's like, we're running out of astromechs fast. And then like 1 second later, you cut to R2D2 and he like plugs in one thing. And then it cuts back to the captain. And he's like, that little droid did it. And then it cuts to R2D2 turning his head and going, whoa!
Yeah,
Oh, are you talking about Captain Pancakes?
Yeah, Captain Panaka.
That's in pancakes.
so
Captain
And
Panko
they replaced him
breadcrumbs.
with Typhon or Eye Patch. In
Yes.
The,
Oh, yeah.
in the second one.
we
Captain
also get
Typho.
introduced to arguably, unpopularly, the greatest Sith Lord of all time.
Chancellor Palpatine.
Plagueis in the background.
Jar Jar Binks. Tell me I'm wrong. We have a whole episode to discuss that.
Okay, ready? Not real. End of conversation. Next question.
You know what?
That's no fun. It's
Fine, we'll move on.
No,
man.
it's okay. We can have
No,
we can actually
there's always a bigger fish.
There is.
I hate that scene. I hate the underwater scene so much.
All right.
Ooh, Dante.
So I think we have a question that we should be answering. Jordan, go for it.
So
Yeah, we got stuff.
we get into we get through the story. We get introduced to Padme. We get introduced to Qui-Gon. We get introduced to the Sith as a whole.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about the Cradle Robber. That's right.
The what?
The Cradle Robber.
Oh, I
Padme?
couldn't understand you. You had too much chocolate in your mouth. So we get introduced to Padme. We get introduced to all of them. By the way, I love how the Padme is supposed to be hiding and incognito, but then the imposter queen goes, "Padme, go with them," and like, really?
Yeah, that's really good. And there's like a very specificity which character is which in which particular scene, because they obviously the actresses
was
like,
Keira
look
Knightley.
exactly
Keira
the
Knightley.
same. And even back then they looked
Elizabeth
like literally
Swann.
identical. So because I don't know, I
There was
forget
a lot-
exactly which one's where, but
At
they
the-
were
yeah,
very
few
precise
different.
with it.
Wasn't Anne Hathaway in there somewhere too?
No.
I don't think so. I
No,
don't
no,
think
no.
she was old enough.
No. No, but at that point,
There was another
Natalie
famous.
Natalie Portman
Yeah,
was
probably. There might have been a more back.
She was 18, I think. She was
18
still
at that
in-
time.
she
Keira
was
Knightley
still
was
in
14.
school. Like she like had to stop. She wasn't able to go to the premiere of Phantom Menace because she had to go take finals.
Right. She was 18 and Keira Knightley was 14, I think.
Yeah.
But they looked identical. And the thing was too
Literally.
is that I think when she calls her Padme, I don't know if I think
Maybe Padme is just a common name like
that
Susan.
either that or it might have been. I feel like we discussed this in the Not Your Father's Star Wars episode, which was sort of the same thing with the Skywalker thing, which is I just don't think they thought about it, and so they just called her Padme. So it's either that, and they either that or they specifically like just don't mention the fact that she's just known as Queen Amidala, and that they don't really know what her first name is. They
Fair.
just know her
Okay.
as the Queen, because like with take England for example, you know her as Queen Elizabeth, but I don't even know what the Queen's last name is. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? You know, but it could be something like that where they just know as like, Queen Amidala instead of
Padme.
Pad-
Amidala.
instead of
the
Padme.
elected queens of Naboo.
Yeah, exactly. So it's
It's like the Pope.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
always
exactly,
hate
like-
that, Lawrence.
Shout
But
out to you, Dad.
Yeah, then on Naboo we elect leaders.
We elect our
and
monarchy.
we elect our monarchy, and we elect them when they're 14. Like,
well, the
it's
thing
like-
is
she
too,
was the
like also
youngest.
she,
She was
the
but
youngest.
also
youngest.
like Palpatine. I didn't know until the Clone Wars came out that his first name was Sheev.
yeah,
You know what?
That's a more
you
No
know what
idea.
Yoda's full name is?
Yoda.
No, there's a second name for Yoda.
I don't want to hear it because
I'd
it's
have
gonna
to
ruin
look
it
it
for
up
me.
if we want to know it.
But anyway, so so we get introduced to all the characters.
So we get introduced to all these characters. The movie kicks off. We get to see the first CGI battle of its magnitude.
Which one? There's 5 that happen at the same time. So which one are you talking about?
All of them. We get introduced to the true most badass Sith, Darth Maul.
Oh yeah.
Formerly Darth, now just Maul.
Now just
Call me
Maul.
old master.
I
wish he
have
talked more.
come to kill you.
It'd be cool if we had like how Maul talked. Like I know this is all like retrospective and what a lot of what Sam Witwer added to the character. But like if we had like Maul, like how he talks in like Clone Wars, like in Phantom Menace, that would have been
so much
He
That
only
would've
has
sick.
one line.
He has one
He's like
line
one or
in the
two
whole
lines.
movie.
And that's it. Like he says something to the
speaks,
Emperor.
like 8 words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ray
He
Park.
says- Ray Park,
Great guy.
beautiful. It was amazing, like for the fight scenes and all that. And honestly, like the second you see, like in the Clone Wars finale, we're bouncing all over the place. But the second you see like the Ray Park stance, and you're like, oh, it's mocap.
That's-
You start freaking out because it's like, oh, it's Ray Park again. It's like you merge the two best parts. Of the
You
character.
merged the two best parts of Darth Maul.
Yeah, so we get introduced to, like I said, the most badass Sith. Which, weirdly, at the time, he really does become a true Darth Maul. Because in Legends continuity, Plagueis dies. At
Yes.
the same time that he's fighting Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Double saber.
The best.
That was a
So
revelation.
the question is now, really, after watching the first film in the prequel series, George Lucas got a lot of backlash.
Yep.
Got a lot of backlash. Not only for the amount of CGI he used, but for Jar Jar Binks and for the way of writing and the plot and a whole bunch of stuff. So my question is really, is it George Lucas's fault or are Star Wars fans bad fans?
I think it's
both.
Both.
But a lot of both.
I think
I'm going to ask each of you to support your explanation
Yeah.
within a 2-minute conversation because y'all like to talk.
Yeah.
So, Jack, I'm going to start with you. Why is it both? I'm going to set the timer.
Looking at it as a retrospect, like now, like obviously when I first watched Star Wars as a kid, like Jar Jar was funny. He farted and stuck his tongue out and stuff.
poop jokes.
Poop jokes. But like he wasn't the best addition to the franchise. And yeah, it was a smart move at the time because obviously we talked about this in the last episode. Like Star Wars is made for kids. Like Jar Jar brought in a ton of kids. But like the fans take it very far where we're like, "Oh my gosh, that's not what we wanted. We didn't want Jar Jar." So like they get butthurt and they cry about things when it's not like we want like they
Black
wanted the
Stormtroopers.
original we wanted the original trilogy redone, but if the original trilogy was just redone, we would have been mad about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I
like
get what you're saying.
I don't think that there was any right way to do the like obviously people have rewritten it, and we talked about this in the first episode, like a lot of people rewrote the prequels to make more sense. I mean, like I still love the Phantom Menace. I love
it's a
the
great
Duel of
it's
Fates.
it's honestly it's a great film.
It is.
There's
Yeah, weirdly, that film has grown on me. I've liked that film more as I've gotten older.
I've learned to appreciate them a lot more, but
I think that I mean like I think that's pretty much my point. Like like George Lucas obviously made some bad decisions with a lot of characters. And his for whatever reason his dialogue was not the best in the prequels. But
I have some opinions on the writing.
Yeah.
But I think that it's also the fans to blame about a great many deal.
Let's see. For both. For Lucas, where the blame lies with him is maybe just a little bit of over eagerness to, like, get that. I don't know. The technology might have been a little bit underbaked. Maybe for Phantom Menace, like it might have been just not enough along so that people. You're already changing from like the original Star Wars, which again, the entire aesthetic of the original trilogy is, and this is also goes into why the fans are dumb as well. The entire aesthetic of the original trilogy is supposed to be like like gritty, lived in, like feels real. Like so, like you have all this technology of land speeder stuff that feels like futuristic to us. It's a common thing for everyone in the universe.
Yeah.
You get to like the prequels, where everything's polished, but it's on purpose though. You're in the core, like it's the it's the center. There's more people. There's more population. It's more the entire original series. Like if you look and know the lore, like is it all in the Outer Rim, all in the sparsely populated like areas of the Empire, and even the Republic when they were in charge had little control because like they didn't care. There was no population. The wealth wasn't there. Like maybe when you have like a resource, so they start causing issues, you go in.
Yeah,
But-
you're in like in the original trilogy, you're in like the Nevada and the
Yeah, exactly.
sort of like
You're in-
deserts and all these like
The
this-
backwoods,
you
like,
know,
yeah.
all the
The
yeah,
rural
the
parts of the
backwoods, the
galaxy.
rural parts, and then you throw it back to the prequels, and now they drop you right into the New York City and the L.A. of all that.
Yeah,
sort
so a
of
little
stuff.
bit of it for the on the fan side is just like not understanding like very obvious things. And again, nothing in the prequels is not just like a very easy extrapolation from something that was already kind of present in like the at least like in a more subtle way in the originals. Because again, there is the prequels are inherently more. They're also inherently more political, which turns
yeah.
people off a little bit, and it's a little bit less like hero's journey like the original trilogy, and a little bit more thriller, and that's the nature of it because it's not a happy ending. It's not as much of a happy story. It's the story of because again, it's not a happy story. It's Star Wars, but it's the story of a people of a republic turning themselves over willingly to like fascism
Corruption.
Without realizing it.
to authority. Yeah, without realizing it and being tricked along the way, deceived, and then like
It's the fall of a
Exactly.
hero and the fall of
So,
like,
Julian-
civilization.
Well, then what's your take?
So, it's a mix of both. I think fans are always going to be picky and choosy, and that's like as a fan of Star Wars, like, and we've talked about this with the sequels, and we've talked about this as stuff. It's like, from my personal opinion, is I love story. I could pick apart a story and be like, I didn't like this one thing that doesn't make sense or whatever. But also, like, in my opinion, like, I love the sequel movies. I'm a Star Wars fan, and the movies, to me, I watch it. They feel like Star Wars. They're fun. It's exciting. I love the adventure. That's how I view them. And there are people who will sit there and be like, I don't like Rey, or I don't like Jar Jar, I don't like this specific thing, and that's fine. Like, you can not like that stuff, but when you take it and you start like berating, George Lucas because he wrote Jar Jar into the script, and they're like, he doesn't even know what Star Wars is. And I'm
You're
like,
focusing
he
on the wrong
wrote Star
Pretty
Wars.
sure he
Come on.
knows what Star Wars
You know what I
is.
mean? And so, like, it's stuff like that. So that's where the fans kind of, you're always going to have toxic fans, so you can't really blame the fans for everybody's going to have their opinions, and that's always going to be how it's going to be. But
they also almost always place the blame in the wrong place. Like look at for the sequels. Like I don't have any great love for the sequels at all. I think I've made that clear. But when we got to like Last Jedi, which obviously is a very divisive film, like a shit ton of like the fan attention went to like the actors. So instead of like the horrible characters, the writers of horrible characters getting, or at least in the opinions of the fans that didn't like these characters,
like with Rose.
yeah, like why
was,
did I forget her name?
Kelly Marie Tran.
Why did she as an individual? Why was she attacked when instead of the horribly? If you didn't like her character, then why didn't you attack the screenwriter?
Right,
Why didn't you attack the director? You didn't accomplish anything.
Exactly,
but
and
make
they-
us look bad as fans.
But that's how fans take it, is they go to a level where they just want to be mad about something.
Yeah.
And so they find it and make it a point to be mad and like you said, place blame in the wrong place. So it's not Kelly Marie Tran, but Kelly Marie Tran played that character beautifully.
She did.
But the character's just not written well.
And as a detractor of those movies, like when you're a fan like that who's decided to like make that going to be your point of attack, like okay, you're making because I genuinely watch the sequels and am upset, and it's not because there's an Asian actress like sitting there. Like that's not what it is. It's just like
the character
I
just
have
isn't written
creative
well.
differences that I just don't think the universe should have gone that direction.
Right,
But
and
again,
that's-
and I get
and
mad
that's
at it, but
how I
don't.
feel-
My anger shouldn't take me to a place where I attack actors.
Right, and
like,
this leads into my point about the George Lucas's part.
Yeah, I get a little intense.
This
No, I
leads
get it.
this leads to my part about it's
Yeah.
partially on George Lucas as well, because when you're writing the prequels, you have this. Okay, Star Wars is hot. Everybody loves Star Wars. We know we're gonna make something. It's gonna be a really big deal. Everybody loves it. And you've got George Lucas, and they're all saying, "Okay, you're gonna make a Star Wars movie. You created Star Wars. You know what it is. Feel free to just go for it. You now have all this extra money. Just do what you want." And that's a perfect example of taking somebody and giving them too much power to a point where, like, okay, in the 70s and 80s, he wrote everything and whatever, but the technology didn't allow him to do too much. Whereas you come into 99 and all this sort of stuff is now the technology allows you to do too much, and you've got George Lucas, who obviously has this idea and is taking it so far because he has the money and the ability to do that. And there should have been, in my opinion, this is why I think it's partially on him as well, is there should have been story executives who were strictly there to say this part of the story is not making sense, or this is too much, or but it's George Lucas,
people,
or it's George Lucas, it's Star Wars. We'll be on your we'll be part of this, because there's more than one screenwriter all the time, but they'll be like, okay, George Lucas, I have this idea, and all of them idolize him as a writer for writing the originals. So he says, I want to do this, and they're like, yes, sir, George Lucas, whatever you want to do, and that's kind of the hard part, where you kind of have to sit there and be like, I'm a massive fan of George Lucas. I idolize him. He changed filmmaking. He's an amazing writer. He knows what he's doing. But as somebody who writes a lot, you want to say, like, okay, George Lucas, this really crazy guy that I idolize, you're going too far. You need to dial it back a little bit, and that's where it's partially on him. Is
I think
he
that's
should
kind
have
of-
said,
I have a
"Hey,"
different thought on this.
they should have had other
let
people
someone
there
else
to filter out the stories.
I think that's kind of what Dave did for him when they were doing Clone Wars.
Yeah.
Like,
But
George
wasn't a
obviously
yes
had this
man.
amazing idea, but then Dave came in and he was like, all right, well, I'm going to take your idea and I'm going to move it in a direction that actually makes sense, and you shows progression of these characters.
And he was a storyboarder for Avatar.
Yeah.
And a lot of the best episodes
did
of
a lot of the
Avatar
animation.
are... And he was an animation guy as well. But, like, you can go literally see in the credits for a lot of his, like, the best Avatar episodes. Like,
that's how they found
storyboarded, Dave Filoni. So it's, like, almost gave a little more sense to the prison, like, to the
He
mind.
knows how to.
and that's I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, when it comes to yes, there are toxic fans, but yes, there's also a level of humility that you have to be like, yes, I'm George Lucas and I made Star Wars, so I should do what I want, but there should be people there to monitor that, to say, okay, but we are fans of the movie.
Yeah.
So you're George Lucas is writing the movie not as a fan, he's writing it as the creator of the universe.
He is.
Fans and story executives who are also trying to make the movie sell more. This is when executive producers and things should be smart about this kind of stuff, to say, George Lucas, you wrote these movies and they were great, but you are not the greatest writer in cinema history. Let's have other people proofread. Proofreading is a big thing in the film industry that gets overlooked all the time, and that's why you have horrible Lifetime movies with terrible plots.
Yeah.
Or you get terrible sequels. Sequels are like the downfall of the cinema industry. Every time there has like Halloween 2 is such a downfall in the Halloween franchise because they really honed in on, okay, now he's their brother and all this sort of stuff, and you have to sort of put limits on stuff.
Okay, so real quick, my take is that it's just bad fans.
Really?
Yeah, George Lucas did nothing wrong. It's his universe. He gets to do what the hell he wants.
And I would say, like, there is a level of... I can see where you're coming from because you're in the industry, so it's almost like everyone best work together to create a film, like a full thing.
Yeah, I
and
get
like
it.
so anybody, one person being almost like, even if it is like the creator of it, but also like, we don't get the original trilogy in the way it is today, when the iconicness it is, without Lucas being like, I'm gonna fund the first one like myself, and I'm gonna do it. So because I don't
all
want
three.
studios to come in and interfere with my vision. Because again, we will say like on the opposite end of it, studios can come in, producers can come in, and almost take it the exact opposite way, and then you take it too far in the other direction. I can the creative can 100% like get too into the weeds, but then the we can be watered down too much the other
and
way.
there are people who do this, and I want to make a point for writers, and as a person who tries to sell scripts and stuff like that, that you as a writer are able to say, these executive producers are trying to change my vision, and you can just say no, and unfortunately you don't get your movie made, but it's not something you don't want.
Yeah.
And so like that's where I kind of disagree with your point, is if you
you're allowed to.
if you want to make a film that you want, great, by all means make the film that you want. But if you want to make a film that is good and is going to sell well, and you want to make something that's going to impact people, this is where I think George Lucas got too in over his head. And there were other story executives, but they said, it's George Lucas, we're just going to say yes to everything. And it does like episode 1 really goes to show what it's like when you have an idol who says, I want to make another movie.
Yeah.
And they really just kind of say yes to
No, I
everything.
can agree
See,
with. I can
but-
agree with. I can see where he's coming from a bit, and I can see the level of. I think Lucas, by that point in his career, had probably accumulated just a little bit too much power. Because even like in the
Exactly,
original,
that's what
in
I'm
the-
saying.
in
There
the-
was too much
in
power,
the
and he
original
just went off.
trilogy, like he doesn't direct all 3 movies. Like in the. Like he doesn't direct like the best movie like in the franchise.
Wasn't
the
even
second one
directed by him.
he's not is Lawrence Kasdan, which being a Kasdan doesn't mean you know Star Wars, judging by his son. But but yeah, like so yeah, I lost my train of thought, but yeah, exactly.
So my take is that it's not George Lucas. The reason, as everybody has issues with it. Okay, he had his vision. He had this vision mapped out when he was in college. He wanted to go down into the wills of the Force. Like this was the step in that direction.
Hardcore doubt. But we'll get into that.
Based
argument
off
again.
of what he said. Going off of what he said in multiple interviews.
He also said
I
that
don't
he
think he
wrote
means the
all 3
entire
original
story,
movies as
like-
one script, and I doubt that that's true too.
I think that there is truth to that. He had this idea, and he had like.
I think he had a backstory, but it was
But I
not
don't-
as detailed as he
when he-
says.
I
when
think
he
he had a
says
rough
that, I
draft.
don't-
That's not the point.
Yeah, but we're getting
Yes,
out of the
that's
weeds.
not
What
the point.
I'm just when he says that, I don't think he means like I have my entire 3 movies plot for plot. Like I think he says like I have the general idea of
Right.
this universe.
So
of
he,
the, kind of the
but
plot
he had the
points,
general
maybe.
idea that the Force would be
Obviously,
the
like when you
force of
develop
the
something,
wills,
things happen.
going down
Things
to that
change.
path. So, but in regards to this, George Lucas is the creator. He gets to do whatever the hell he wants. That's my take. As simple as that. And fans make it worse. So much that Ahmad Best stopped acting because of how bad he was
Yeah,
bullied.
the reaction was certainly
for
over the top.
portraying
But
Jar
that's-
Jar Binks. This is a bad fandom.
But
That's what I'm saying. We as fans, not all of us, but a good group of us, are bad fans. And I'm just gonna call it how I see it. You call a spade, right? There's bad fans in Star Wars, but there's bad fans in everything.
There are,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes, but there's also
People had issues with the Black Stormtrooper.
that's definitely a horrible fandom, and I'm not discounting that. I'm definitely saying there are toxic fans everywhere. Everybody, like, again, I'll make a point because we were all simultaneously playing Hogwarts Legacy, and people are trying to get that game shut down because J.K. Rowling has a producer credit on that game. But she said something about trans people, and there's literally a trans character in the game, and trans people are trying to get the game shut down. And it's like, yes, just because J.K. Rowling has a producer credit doesn't mean that the game doesn't symbolize her. The game symbolizes the universe of Harry Potter.
Yeah, that's one of those get off
And-
in the weeds, like symbolic protest things.
And that's sort of the same thing
which
as-
these people don't care that there's legislation though. That's like I'm not going to get into the weeds on this, but like there's literal legislation like right now that will affect trans people way worse than Hogwarts Legacy will. And
Right,
nobody,
and-
and I don't see you tweeting about that, unfortunately.
Well, we're gonna
So-
get out of that.
We're get
area.
out of the weeds here,
I think
but
one of
we're
the
gonna keep this-
biggest toxic fandoms that I've seen in a while, besides Star Wars,
Star Wars is not
was-
for toxic.
The Last of Us. The Last of Us Part 2. And if
I haven't
I
played
under-
it yet.
I
so
understand
no
I
spoilers.
won't go into it,
Yeah.
but there's a character, her name is Abby, and she does something, and it tore the fan base up.
Yeah.
And like she got death threats from people because of her character, and I'm like,
Yeah.
she's an actor. Like you can't.
And that's just, again, that is just the epitome of bad fans.
And that was
But
and
you
that was
also have
bad
to
fans
take the
'cause Last of
movie
Us
for
is
what
such
it
a
is.
specific story, and the fact that they couldn't understand the because obviously like they hate her for she's not. And don't get me wrong, she's like from what I haven't played the full game, but that character you're referring to, like I don't want to spoil, but she's not like the most like entertaining character in the world. Like
No,
she's
she's
not.
not.
She's not nearly as good as like. Because you play as her as well. I
Yeah,
believe.
you do.
Yes, but she's not nearly as compelling of a character as Ellie and Joel.
No.
But her story fits exactly, perfectly into the overall idea of like consequences and like love, like is not a good thing. It fits perfectly into the overall Last of Us universe.
well,
You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like,
but
back to Star Wars.
Back
they
to
just-
Star
like,
Wars.
Fans didn't understand their own universe. Like, and that happens
Yeah.
with
and
Star
I think
Wars
well,
too.
and that's what
I'm trying
that's
to
where
get to.
yeah. So
Yeah.
that's George Lucas has his vision, and the fans don't understand his vision, so they have a problem with it. That's where I say it's bad fandom. I think that the prequels were revolutionary for the time
They were.
because the CGI amounts that we use, the technologies that George
Yeah.
Lucas pushed, the money that he spent out of his own pocket and out of his own studio to make these movies happen were unheard
Yeah,
of.
CG developed in the way it
Okay.
did because of Lucas.
So I have
Like-
one point on that, but does the overwhelmingly impressive CG for the time make up for plot points that don't make sense?
Which plot
I don't
points
think
don't make sense
I
to
don't
you?
have as many
plot
I don't
points
have
or
nearly as many
characters-
plot points.
plot
like,
points or characters that don't serve a purpose. Like Jar Jar serves no purpose other than to get them to the Gungans.
Wrong.
And he's funny.
He also serves the purpose as to give the Chancellor power, but anybody
Also
could have
wrong.
done that.
But
he's
they
like-
could have done that with
That's part
any
of it,
other
but
character, and you get to a point where you have four. Like again, I'm not shitting on the movie. I love Phantom Menace. I think that movie's amazing. But also, it's a perfect example of I'm gonna make so much money if I have 4 space battles happening at the same time, and that's like okay, but you're now driving away from the story and more focusing on how
I
impressive
don't
your
even
work
know if
is.
it's,
But
like, yeah,
we can move on to the next
So,
question.
and I'm going to say wrong simply because I want to close out my argument here.
yeah.
Okay.
Jar Jar serves more of a purpose than I think people realize. One, he shows Anakin that you can mock the Jedi. Okay? Because he's...
I'm sorry, run that by me again?
Yeah, I'm a little confused on that point.
I
Basically,
think I know what you're talking about, but
when Qui-Gon tells him not to do something and he sticks his tongue out at him, or that when he's at the table eating the fruit and he goes, do that again, and but he does it again.
So
and it's like
he's
what you're disrespecting.
What you're
the
saying
Jedi.
is that because he
He's part
saw
of the whole
he
thing.
saw Jar Jar stick out his tongue, he then becomes Darth Vader.
No.
No,
I'm
no,
saying-
I don't think he's saying that, but
I'm saying it's like a little, just another little
There's
thing
little
that adds
seeds.
to the,
There's little
the
seeds growing in there.
psychology, maybe.
but
like,
you have to.
He pushes the admiration for Padme and Anakin. Jar Jar is like the fulcrum. He's the tipping point.
I so
I
disagree with
I
you.
can't really.
And you
agree
have
with
to.
that, but
But again, this is when I say that like, you view it that way, but I'm telling you, like, from a person who writes movies, there's no way that George Lucas thought in the back of his
No.
mind that if
Those original
Jar Jar
characters
sticks
dropped.
out his tongue, that's going to be an epitome for Anakin learning about mocking the Jedi.
No,
like,
but
that's
Jar
just not
Jar-
a thing. And
the
that's what
original
I'm
plan
talking
for
about.
Jar Jar was not for Jar Jar to be this bumbling buffoon. What happened was George Lucas took Jar Jar, people received him poorly, and he let the fans dictate what happened
wait,
with the character.
wait, so you're like a full on
Jar Jar Lucas-
like
or Jar Jar
like,
Lucas.
you're like a full
you
on
think
Darth.
that
So you think the
George
Darth?
Lucas thought Darth Jar Jar?
So in an interview,
But
George
we already have
Lucas,
Plagueis though, and Plagueis
Conspiracy
does predate,
Central
like,
on this
and there's only
podcast.
2. There's like a rule of 2, and like we already have Plagueis, and like so there's 4.
I
Sith?
think that Jar Jar really was Plagueis out of the original. Hear me on this. Hear me on this. In
Doesn't
the
Plagueis-
original,
doesn't he have to
But
die?
There's like
I'm just gonna do this really fast to show
Okay.
the Illuminati symbol going on
It's
here.
like-
this is how
I'm
Jordan
not
views
doubting
Star
it. Like,
Wars.
and there are a few compelling
think-
things related.
so
to
in
the
an
theory,
interview,
but
Okay.
I think it's more
George
Let's
Lucas
let him go.
described his premise for the character of Jar Jar. It's the same way that he looked at Yoda.
Oh, he did describe it as that. I will give you.
Did. You find this little helpless creature, and he goes, it's all in a fantasy. You find this helpless creature, and it turns out that, you help him along his path and his quest or whatever, and then you find out that he's this powerful user and this sorcerer or whatever.
Oh my God, just nobody knows Naruto here, do they? Nobody else.
No,
I know Naruto.
no,
He's
we're
like
in the
he's
wrong
like
universe
he's
for
trying to
that.
say he's Toby.
Wow,
From Naruto.
yeah,
he's
you're
like
kinda right,
he
yeah.
wanted it to say that like Toby from Naruto was. I don't know if anyone's gonna know this at all, but like that's actually funny. I've never thought of that. Like
So that's
connection.
what George Lucas said in this interview, and I'll cite the interview for you guys at another point because I don't have it readily accessible because I didn't think that this is where this was going to go, but he says that, and based off of what he's saying in this interview, you look at
He's
Jar
the key
Jar.
to everything. I think that's like literally the quote, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, well, that's pretty much where I'm going with it. Is that Jar Jar's the key to everything? But I think that Ahmad Best also did an interview where he said that his role was significantly cut back for the second and third movies, based off of how the performance went for the first one and the character was received.
I mean, to be
and
fair,
I think
that
that's where
one-
they went
yeah.
with. That's where they went and said, okay, well, Maul got cut in half. He was the one. We thought well, think about it too. But Jar Jar is connected on Naboo with Sheev. Okay. I think that Jar Jar and Sheev knew each other before.
There's
a lot of connections.
Okay,
that-
I don't discount the idea that
this
like
is-
Lucas might have thought like, okay, what if I have like Maul? There's like they're both in the Senate, like in a way, or like he's a representative eventually. Like I can understand like maybe, but I don't. It just seems like
So
it's
this
just
is my
such a-
this is my. I want to make
and
one.
again, it's probably so far removed from what he
I
originally
want to make
thought into the
one
actual
final.
film,
I want to
so.
make one final point before we move on to the next question, and it's totally going to discount your entire argument. I think, which is, you have to take the movie for what it is versus what everybody wants it to be and what George Lucas says. Unfortunately, George Lucas is not God, and we have
He is in Star Wars.
but he's not. And that's the thing that you have to understand as a fan is that he literally, if you watch the Phantom Menace documentary, he sits there and goes, I wonder if it's too much.
Yep.
And I'm telling you, like, okay, George Lucas may have gone back and said, well, my plan for Jar Jar was this, and he was going to be this big character and all this stuff. But I'm sitting there listening to George Lucas say that. That is a filmmaker who got too in over his head, who realized he made a character that doesn't make any sense, and turned around and said, I have to find a way to cover this up and make myself not look bad. So he came out in this interview and said, okay, Jar Jar was going to be this awesome character, but the fans received him wrong to save his own ass. In reality, if you watch the movie at face value, you listen to the dialogue, you listen to the character, you realize his purpose, Jar Jar does nothing for them except get them to the Gungans.
But he does the drunken fighting thing.
And he
where
does the-
pretends
exactly,
He pretends
but
to not be good, but he takes out the droids though.
Yeah, but he doesn't. But he literally. But if you
Maybe in that movie,
Drunken
he does
Fist.
not.
But if they,
Yes,
and I'm.
Drunken
This is
Fist.
why I'm saying it's both. It's a fandom who bullied Ahmad Best. Great, that's horrible, and you should not do that because it's not the actor's fault that they played a character that you didn't like. Wow, already? Holy crap!
all
We've
the
only
time.
answered one question.
Okay, so next
Anyway,
question.
moving on.
Next question. Why
It's
Attack of
both.
the Clones is the best?
This is such a controversial topic.
Okay. In my opinion, you guys,
say
I'm going to
about
ask for
Phantom, no.
5 minutes of uninterruptedness real quick so I can get off my soapbox.
Okay.
All right.
Okay?
I'm stepping back from my.
Christian's like ready to go.
Again, because all right, let me just. I mean,
No. Let's let Jordan answer.
No, it's literally
Get it out now.
because it
Get it
fits
out
the
now.
last thing as well. Because this is a little bit of a counter to like Julian's thing. I think most of what is on paper, like even story wise, to like the prequels, is rather decent. I think there's some characters that don't have, like you said, maybe don't have as much purpose as others. But I think like realistically, like the actual plot, like when you think about it as like the overall story of the three movies, it makes sense. Like it's good.
No, I'm not
But
saying the
it's
plot
just the
doesn't make sense. I'm
execution and
saying
some of
the
the
execution is
dialogue and
rough,
like
yeah.
and some of the rough CG
It's
at
like
times.
Jack's fan film.
A few characters here and
It
there.
doesn't make sense at all, but it does make sense.
And
But I made it
see,
make sense.
And I see the
Coming
vision.
soon.
I see the vision present in Attack of the Clones, but you're never gonna get that to unlock. Remember me? Like that it's there.
Right. So,
that it's
Attack of the
achieved.
Clones, let's
like
talk
I
about
see
it.
what you're gonna talk about, but it's just I don't know.
It's my favorite Star
Yeah,
Wars movie. It's my favorite Star Wars movie because, one, you're introduced to arguably the second most badass Sith user, which is Darth Tyrannus, which you look at everything about him. From his stance, he's an elegant duelist.
Former Jedi.
The actor
Former
playing
Jedi.
him.
He shows the vulnerability. It's just so, like, the dude was he was Dracula, and he was in a metal band, and he was in Lord of the Rings.
He
and
is James Bond. If
He
anyone's
is
wondering.
exactly like
the
he
guy.
is
His cousin wrote James
James
Bond,
Bond.
and he based it on
partial.
Christopher-
Yes,
Because he
And
hunted
it's
Nazis during the
Yeah.
I
Like-
think after the World War II.
real life badass.
Yeah.
Forget
He was
forget
also
Sith.
alive and witnessed the very last public execution.
Yeah, that is
He
true.
was.
Yeah, via guillotine.
Oh, what a fun machine!
So they needed that in the Star Wars universe.
I think the little guillotine axe, you know.
Lightsaber guillotine.
So Attack of the Clones, very simply put for me, is my favorite movie, and
love
to
it. It's a
me
good movie.
is probably the best Star Wars movie in the prequels. Outside the 15-minute lava battle, one, because we get to see how powerful Yoda is. Two, you get to see the Grand Army of the Republic at its rawest and most powerful point. You get to see where the clones come from. You get to see Boba for the first time.
Camino is awesome.
Camino, best. That was outstanding. You get to see Obi-Wan fighting a Mandalorian foundling now. But you get to see him fighting and how the Mandalorians and the Jedis, going back to Legends continuity with the Mandalorian Wars, which connects everything. You get to see just how the Jedi are so in tune with the Republic, and like minus the I don't like sand part, and Anakin falling and basically becoming like creepy with Padme. like the Naboo stuff completely pointless. I mean, it's not pointless, but it's
Yeah.
pointless.
And that's my main
When you
gripe.
look at the main pinnacle of the Clone Wars, this started it all. This kicked it all off. And because of Attack of the Clones, we get the best story arcs in Star Wars, which is the Clone Wars TV series and movies.
That's actually part of my
So-
my notes.
Yeah.
Like, because of Attack of the Clones, you get this. This is my soapbox. This is my hill. I'm willing to die on this because without this, we don't get the expanded universe that we deserve.
Yeah, I mean,
to
a lot
get.
of the characters and
get
such
Captain
that have-
Rex.
the
I think-
clones extrapolated out of
I
that.
think
Yeah.
part of like what a lot of fans hear when they're talking about the prequels is like they're like, oh well, I didn't like this part of the movie or I didn't like this part, and they're immediately like, oh, you hated the prequels. Like, no, I very much like the prequels. I grew up on the prequels. Like, they're great
Exactly,
movies. There are specific parts of the prequels that I don't like. Like, I'd say 3/4 of that movie
I have the
like
most
Sam.
in Attack
Isn't-
that I don't enjoy.
isn't like my favorite parts. Like, a lot of it is just Anakin and Padme being creepy with each other.
and some of the
And, like, I
most,
don't like
yeah.
that.
CGI
I
pair.
love
I forgot.
I
That's my, I hate
love
that
the
scene.
ending. I love the like. I love when they're in the Geonosian Coliseum, and like the Jedi all come out, and there's like a giant war, and then like they're all surrounded, and then the clones come out, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, they're here!" And it's like, "Dun dun."
I like
I love that part.
I like that part, but this is also where we get to see, well, like I said, Anakin's creepy in this movie with Padme. I can sense everything going on in that room, Master. Super creepy, super peeping Tomish. But like when they go to Tatooine and he slaughters the Sand People, and you can see him fulfilling into the rage, like falling into it.
yeah, I love
You see, I don't.
that
It's,
part.
my
You
thing
start
with-
to see the taste of
story
Vader.
movie for
I think-
him. Christian, say what you have to say,
Yeah,
and then
I think
I
the
have
last
I have a thing about
like
it.
for I think Anakin is because he's like obviously Obi-Wan's a massive part of this movie because he has his own arc like by himself, and I think that arc is like I don't like that like Obi-Wan on Camino as much as I think other people do. Like I it's like a little detective-y type thing, but I like the CG in that scene, like the white ass walls just blind me.
Yeah,
Like,
that was-
it's
that was-
just
it was a
it's
little
just
rough,
so
but it was
distracting.
definitely-
But again, not the worst part. But again, I can't deal with any of the Naboo Anakin stuff, and that's just Anakin is just so unlikable for much of the film. And I like Hayden Christensen a lot in 3. Like I've like
Oh, it
grown
was
to
fa-
like him.
it was
But
complete
there's
switch.
very little of his performance in this that I'm able to get attached to at all. So that just makes any of like his
And this is
like and what's her name? Who's a really good actress?
Portman.
Like Natalie Portman is not like good in this either, and their chemistry is probably the worst
It's
chemistry I've
very
ever seen on
cringy.
film. Like maybe besides when Finn and Rose kissed at the end of like the 8th movie because they didn't.
but this
set
is
it up.
this is another thing that plays into my plot point of it's not just bad fans. The story ideas of episode 2 are there.
Yeah, exactly.
It's gonna be we're starting a war. We're making these really two important characters fall in love. We're having him go through all these traumatic moments. Obi-Wan's doing some detective stuff. They're starting to realize that the Jedi are not the greatest people in the universe, and they're starting to realize that there is
Political
somebody who's
maneuvering.
a political maneuvering around this and this and that. The story ideas are there, and this goes for all of the prequels. And including episode 3, which is arguably the best of the 3. But this goes for all of them, that the story ideas are there, which I give George Lucas credit for. But I also blame him solely for the poor execution because
Yeah,
nobody
'cause
said
I don't think he had the
no.
yeah.
Nobody had
both.
nobody had the willpower to say, "Yes, sir, you are the creator of the story. We get it." But this is not going to do well if you do it this way.
Yeah, he should have got a
And
director.
that's-
he should have done a. I think he should have
I
done
think
a,
he should step back.
a
The
Lawrence
originals had
Kasdan
other
type
people direct it.
situation. Like,
But-
you can start it off because I understand like the idea of like even for New Hope, like I understand if like this is your universe, you really want a certain
Where you
visual
kick off the
style.
trilogy
yeah,
and then
you
let
kick
somebody
it.
else do
Like
it.
the idea of like what they were supposed to happen with JJ.
Yeah.
But again, they didn't do any planning. So like with JJ, you set the idea, we set the start of the story, and then we move on, and then we
Well,
like,
and that's a thing that I want to make a point on is the originals. He wrote the very first movie.
Yeah.
He directed the very first movie. It was completely his vision. The second movie, he brought in a second writer
Yeah.
who honed him in with the story, and somebody else directed it. The third movie, he brought in a second writer. They honed in on the story together. A third person directed it. With these 3, it was solely
just
George
Lucas,
Lucas.
yeah.
Nobody else was involved, and that's why I say that. And this is what I say with the originals is that the plot points are there. but the plot points are executed properly
stretched too
because
thin
he does
himself,
not
realistically.
take all the power in the
So-
originals. There are other people, and with the prequels, everybody said it's Star Wars, it's going to make us a bunch of money. George Lucas, you go ahead, you do whatever you want, and nobody honed in on the fact that the execution of these might not be very good if he does it by himself.
Yes.
That's exactly what I'm trying to say
Yeah.
with
I get
filmmaking,
it.
and that's why sequels always
Yeah, I
flop.
think
is
that's kind
because
of how I would
sequels
put it,
are
yeah.
always done like the Star Trek movies with J.J. Abrams. The second one is not nearly as good as the first one because, and don't get me wrong, I love it, but J.J. Abrams took all the credit. He rewrote Wrath of Khan, and they let him do it, and that movie turned out not that great.
I liked it, but
And
No.
I love that movie. I think it's a great movie, but it's
But-
not as good.
off topic.
But anyway, yeah, off
off
topic.
topic. We're gonna get so. I didn't see the original. Sorry, but it's better than the Whales movie.
Oh, and it reaches out.
Don't start talking about the Whales movie.
The Whales movie's good.
The
Whales movie's good.
Because it's a Star Trek episode.
Yeah, it's just an episode. Yeah.
It's got a point.
Yeah, it's good.
Anybody who hates the Whales episode, don't listen.
No, I'm with him actually. I'm fully with him. Like,
I love it. Thank you.
But yeah, Jordan, next point.
So, I like 2 because I believe that 2 leads perfectly into 3.
yeah. Can we be
It
positive?
does.
A little,
It
like, can we
very
be a little
does.
bit positive? Because I think
Yeah.
we were mostly. Obviously, you're the guy who likes it.
I
most.
love
I'm the
number
guy.
2.
I'm probably the guy.
Militarily,
Who,
I like it. I
Yeah.
like the big battles.
Yeah, the
I like
military,
that
that's
stuff.
fun.
I love the
Melodious,
actors.
like,
They
yeah.
cast
I
everybody
love
really
the
well.
movies.
I love it.
I'm
I
pro-
love-
I'm
And we also
probably
get to
one
see the
who
Death
enjoys
Star
it.
plans for the
Yeah.
first time.
Yes.
Yes, that's epic.
That's
Yeah.
why I
The
love it.
ending of that movie is amazing.
Yeah.
The rest
Attack
of the
of the
movie
Clones-
is so-so.
Yeah. Besides
Yeah.
the sequel movies and that for different reasons, like Attack of the Clones is probably the only movie that at different points I like didn't enjoy watching. But like even then like there are like it bleeds to like for instance the ending of Attack of the Clones is amazing.
Yes.
Like the ending where it's bouncing back and forth between like the Republic, but it's playing the Empire music over it, and then like the wedding.
So,
like, it's,
and then we
like,
also
amazing.
get
like,
Jar Jar giving Sheev the emergency powers.
Yeah, I actually like. I think that's a really clever use of Jar Jar. Actually, like in the background, weirdly enough, like that we take Padme out of the situation, so now the dude who's incompetent. Like I like the political maneuvering of that. The start of all the Palpatine decisions was kind of that.
So there's
Yeah.
that. But it segues perfectly into number 3, and then by number 3 we get to the point where you're seeing how the war has taxed Anakin. It's pushed him to the dark side. Now, unfortunately, we get Ahsoka. We don't get Ahsoka in this.
Yeah.
But I could have
Not
had
a
we had
twinkle
Ahsoka.
in his eye.
I think we would have been better to understand his fall. It makes more sense now. But because the Clone Wars arcs and everything, we can understand that. But
Yeah.
we're gonna do a whole episode just on
I
Clone
think
Wars
actually like
shows.
the Clone Wars. I mean, this. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think like this just popped in my head. I think weirdly, and I'm only saying this. I think it will leave my brain the second it goes. I think weirdly, like as much as I like Phantom Menace, we probably never should have got child Anakin. We probably should have got Padawan Anakin, and you could have explained the
Teenager.
story.
He should have
I mean,
been
you
a
should have got
teenager.
the background during the movie. Then the second one, you can actually get a movie mid-war. Would have done so
I could
much
get
better.
so like episode 1 kicks off.
And then also,
Clone
Kicks
Wars.
off Clone
And then
Wars,
episode
and
two.
I think
Yeah, I like
my
that.
always things have been like, all right, in hindsight, knowing everything we know now, if we had a middle movie where you flesh out clones, or you can maybe have Ahsoka, like with Anakin, you can you can do that. Like you can actually have that. And then also, like the very, very simple thing that I think would have like very much saved the prequels a little bit. Or even like just put a little bit of polish over it. Count Dooku in episode 1.
So that would have been cool.
Count Dooku in episode 1.
But
Like
we
on
get
the
to that-
council.
So
we
go-
get to
go ahead
that
of your
into
opinion
the-
on episode
into
3.
the Visions
Yeah.
show. But there's a lot, basing it just off the cinematic stuff, not the cartoons. We get into episode 3, and episode 3 is, like you said, arguably the best of the prequels.
Yeah.
It is. the
Arguably,
best
because
of
I'm
the
going to
prequels.
argue
I think that's
that
the-
Attack of the Clones is better.
The popular
But
opinion, yeah.
popular opinion.
I want to
Unpopular.
talk about the war. Like you're knee
Yeah,
deep
you're
in
yeah.
the
deep,
war.
but
Like
okay,
the only
you
battle
get
we really
like
get,
you
yeah.
get like 10 minutes of it. You just
Yeah.
10 minutes. It's the whole movie, and then the war ends at the end of the movie.
No, it means like the actual footage of it. He means.
I mean,
there's
like
only
actual
two
footage.
actual battles.
Or
Yeah,
is-
yeah,
but
yeah.
we
I see
get-
what
we
you're saying.
get-
Yeah.
the best lightsaber duel, hands down,
Yeah.
Oh,
in
yeah.
all of
Yeah.
Star Wars.
Anakin versus.
I mean, I think I like
Anakin
Duel Fates
versus
aesthetically
Obi-Wan
myself, but it's a better
on-
technical fight. Like,
On Mustafar is fantastic. I would have loved to watch that for another half hour. Like I could have
Yeah,
just
they could've
gotten
kept that
into
going.
it, and I think there's an uncut version where it is
Yeah.
that
Oh,
raw.
yeah.
But we get that. We get to my mind just blanked. We get to the fall of the Republic, the rise of the Empire. We find out that Sheev is actually Darth Sidious and that he's been plotting this the whole time. We get
Order 66.
the stupid screaming attacks. We get execute Order 66. Love it. Great. And we get to see the clones turn on the Jedi and become the next.
I think the biggest thing though was like the personal scenes work so much
Yes,
better.
it
in
made
this
more
movie.
sense.
Think about it when Anakin and Anakin and Obi-Wan in the first 20 minutes of this movie. Oh my God, they're like
brothers.
Because they took entirely and then literally for the Clone Wars they took that 20 minutes of like these two interacting up until like the last moment when like Anakin's shrouded in darkness and Obi-Wan's in the light and they see each other for the last time before they fight. Like when he's going off to get Grievous, like those little moments like that, which are present in all the last ones.
I never
they
thought
hit,
about it.
They hit way better in the third movie.
And this is why I say with episode 3, episode 2 bombed so bad because the execution wasn't that good that the producers of that movie, Rick McCallum specifically, said, we are not letting that happen again.
Yeah.
So they honed in on George Lucas and they said, look, bro,
No more focus.
you need to focus on your characters. You need to write this in a way that people are going to feel bad at the end of it.
Yes.
And there are moments where I think, like, don't get me wrong, the Yoda Sidious battle is awesome, but it takes away from the impact of the Anakin Obi-Wan fight.
Yeah,
I think there's a little bit of that. I never thought about that, but a little bit. Yeah.
I think that point.
But
the reason
also,
that,
I think Order 66 is stupid, but we'll get into that in a second.
I think Order 66
Hot
is,
take,
no,
hot
Order
take.
66 is cool in the way they've explained it later on into canon, but I will say that the worst Order 66 scene in Star Wars is probably, because we have a lot of them now, in video games, TV shows, the worst Order 66 scene is probably the one in the third movie. It really is. All the other Order 66 scenes are way more impactful because you care about the characters in them that are dying. You just have a group of random Jedi dying. Order 66 is kind of one of the lesser
hot take. Order 66 is the dumbest plot hole in history. And the reason I say this is
I quit. But yeah.
they went back and tried to fix it. But when the movie came out, they did not specify that it was implanted into their brains. They did not specify that the clones were trained for this.
Yeah.
So to have an executive order in your military that effectively blows up your own military is stupid.
Wasn't there like before?
Why would you
But
plan?
that's
But
not the
whole plan
only
because
thing.
it's like 10 years in advance, like of having.
well,
like,
also, but
what's
also,
his name
this
do
really
it?
this
Cypher
it would be a lot more. So the other thing is, I say that episode 2 and 3 are not far enough apart. They're only 3 years.
Yeah, I would have. I
Episode 3, but if
thought that
you
about
watch
Star Wars.
episode 2, Anakin's like a teenage boy. You get to episode 3, he's only aged 3 years, and he's like a full-grown man. It feels to me, it feels to me that episode 3, like the very first time I ever watched it, before they revealed that it was only a couple years, when episode 2 and episode 3 came out, I literally, when I saw episode 3, thought that there was a 10-year gap between those two movies.
Well,
that's how I viewed it. And it should be that because Anakin has now grown so much. But having
Lucas has
3
always
years
done some
and
weird stuff like that.
now you're
But
taking
it's
now
not
you're
enough
taking
time
the
between things.
entirety of Clone Wars, which if you watch the Clone Wars show, it does not feel like 3 years. It feels like it's 10
it
years
should be.
long.
But that shows
Because it's
that
7
shows
seasons.
how
Like you feel like it's 7
war-
years of war.
Right, but it and the fact that it feels like that is like it should be that way. And the fact that they're like, you have to now believe that they crammed all of that into 3 years is just too much.
Before we got the Clone Wars and before the like we learned about the inhibitor chips and everything, wasn't like the canon answer to like why the clones turn on, because like Order 66 was like a Senate order, like in case the Jedi got too powerful, and like
There's a
They
whole-
just-
there's
they were
there's
aware
an
of
entire
it,
list
yeah.
of
Yeah.
orders. There's even a list.
Like-
There's even like an order to kill
65,
the 65 or
stuff
64
like that.
or something to kill the Chancellor, if
But
in case it was ever found. Like, look, it's
Palpatine-
one for me too.
Yeah.
And
Like-
as we get to the expanded, Palpatine always planned ahead.
he did.
Okay, because you have Operation Cinder
That's kind of-
after
it's
he
all- it's
died.
Machiavellian.
Right, but
It's
the
Machiavellian.
but
Like,
the
that's what
but
it's
the
supposed
but
to
the
be,
Jedi are involved enough in the Senate to
Know
they
what's
should-
going on.
They should know that Order 66 is a thing.
That's
they
why
don't.
it didn't make sense to me at first.
That's what I'm saying. is-
Now the new like
Do we
the-
know
But-
if those
but
are?
now
Do we
they-
know if those orders are classified? I thought my impression was, and I
I
could be
don't
wrong,
think
But is
so.
it those orders are classified, and if they were ever to be found, then there's a whole list of them,
So-
including the ones that are like, look, kill the Chancellor, a normal one that's like martial law or something.
There's one that
like,
eviscerate the entire planet. There's a whole
Yeah.
list, but the Jedi probably were like, "Oh, it's never gonna get used against us." They
And
probably,
I
but
can-
remember,
But they,
the
but
Jedi
they
do
play
your
it in the
point,
third
like-
movie that they have no idea that it even exists.
Yeah.
And the Jedi are so powerful that it boggles my mind that they don't know.
they're blinded by their own ego.
But they're
that's what it makes
running the
hubris,
military. They are running the military. Like, imagine the military today. Could you imagine if you were a leader in the military today and you had no idea that secretly the government has a plan to take you out?
Who says they don't?
It's
We're
like,
not getting into those conspiracy theories for this
but
episode.
we'll get into that later.
I do
I
agree.
get what you're saying,
I
though.
agree that
I
like
get what you're saying.
originally it didn't really make
I think
sense.
it's
But now,
I
and
think
now,
it's been
but again,
perfectly explained
and this is,
since then. Like, I
but
think it
this
works
is
in
the idea.
universe.
This is the
Like-
last thing I'll say, and this again, this comes back to I love the movies, but this is where George Lucas got too in over his head and said, I have to find a way to kill off all the Jedi. So I'm gonna write an order that effectively just kills all of them.
So-
And to be fair,
And
like
they could have, again, had they had a proper story executive running the story with him, could have said, okay, I like your idea. We have to get rid of the Jedi. I get it. But we have to do it in a more impactful and effective way. So having them maybe, like I said, if you watch the Belated Media videos, the episodes 1, 2, and 3 were good, like actually good. If you watch that, he rewrites it in a way that, so Palpatine becomes Supreme Chancellor, and Anakin takes his position because they don't grant him the rank of Master. So Anakin takes his position and now is in charge of the military. They're going to finally get Grievous at the end of the
kinda
movie.
happens, right? Isn't that
But
basically what
but the
happens?
thing is
Like-
that so what they do at the end is that Anakin doesn't turn to the dark side to save Padme. Anakin turns to the dark side out of fear of losing her, hatred for the Jedi because they didn't give him what he rightfully deserves. And so instead, him and Mace Windu get into this huge argument about how they're going to take down Grievous. And Anakin says, no, I'm in charge of leading the military. If the Jedi are so good, why don't you guys be on the front lines and get General Grievous yourself if you think it's so good? And they go there, and the Jedi are not as good as they think they are, and they get eviscerated, but it's not planned that the Jedi are going to get killed. It's the Jedi go in there willingly thinking they're all that, and they're really not, and they just
a
get
trap.
destroyed.
I
But
would
it's
say,
not
though,
a trap.
I was- I
and
would
that's
say,
though,
but
that
that's the
moment
thing.
would have already happened though, like in the war.
But I think
yeah.
it's more.
Like-
But I think I think the Jedi and Anakin go at it so much as Anakin now being the leader of the military
out of,
goes,
like, out
you
of
know what? No,
hubris, yeah.
I'm the leader of the military, and I'm gonna put you on the front lines. If you think you're so good and you don't believe what I say, why don't you go ahead and do it? And Anakin, subconsciously and ineffectively not realizing it, gets them all
Well, I
murdered,
think we're also, like,
and then
mixing, like, the
turns
Jedi.
to the dark side.
We're viewing the Jedi as almost like a more formal part of the Republic than they really
they
are.
serve at
when there's
the-
like this, when the Jedi
But they
and the Republic,
write it and portray it in a way that they're totally
they're not-
involved in politics.
Yeah, but no,
And
but
they
that's
shouldn't
but
be,
they don't.
But they
but,
write it
but
that
that's
way.
the thing, though. They don't act like they are, and like that's purposeful. The Jedi act like they're so far removed from all this, and that they're not. But then by the end of the war, they're literally scheming to take the Chancellor off the throne.
And so, but my
Like-
thing is, so what I have to say about that is that they say in their opinions. I'm sorry, Jordan. I know I keep cutting you off. last thing is
Poor guy.
they say, okay, we're not involved in politics. We're not involved in the war. We're peacekeepers. They're literally generals in the military.
Mm-hmm.
They are running the war. They are in charge of everything. The Jedi are in
Well, it's
charge of
supposed to
everything.
reflect a
And
real
so-
world,
So-
like
right,
like
but,
type of when we see our
so
politicians
as
talk. It's like
generals,
that.
But as generals in the war, how the hell would they not know that it is planned that in the event that something goes wrong, if you are running the military, it plot-wise doesn't make sense to me that they wouldn't know that that is a thing. That's
See,
in
I'm
place.
I'm
I'll
gonna
have
give
to do
this
more
the
research onto that.
I'm gonna
But
give the
go ahead.
Batman like contingency plan argument, where like Batman wins that argument at the end because like they're all mad that they have the contingency plan. But he's like, wait, what if the Jedi did go bad? The Jedi have broken off.
But they
some
all
of the Jedi
knew-
have
what I'm
broken
saying is
off
that
in the
they-
past.
they
So I
all
think like
knew about
I
it.
think
That's what I'm
Palpatine's
saying.
a smooth enough operator that like say it's
Order
say-
66
say-
in his mind.
I think if it's
so if they sold it to him and
Yeah.
be like, "Hey, this is in case somebody goes to the dark side," and he
yeah,
probably
because
sold it. I
theoretically,
think that is,
Order
I think that is
66
how it's
can be
explained.
applied on just a planetary level. It's not this one order that goes out to everyone.
he doesn't have to
chose
send it out to
send it to
everybody.
everyone. But I think Order 66, if you wanted it to, could have been like applied to
Like
Pong
Pong Krell
like by
should
himself.
have been-
Like if
Well, that's what Order 66 should
again,
be.
it's not clear.
But
I
it's
see what
not.
you're saying. Like, it's
They
not
don't make
clear.
it clear
But-
It
enough.
doesn't,
And then-
it's not communicated in the cinematics enough.
And again,
to
that's
make
and,
it
that,
then-
and this is where
yes.
what happens with the prequels. Like this is a very good thing. Like it is there, but it
Exactly,
shouldn't
but
take this
that's
much
what I'm
discussion
saying.
to,
And
like,
so
to kinda
exactly,
peel
they
back the
shouldn't
layers,
have
if
to
that makes
wait.
sense.
They shouldn't have to wait 6 seasons of an animated TV show that came out later to explain, which I also think is explained wrong, that it's implanted into their brains that, don't get me wrong, I mean, it works for what we got. But just from a story writing perspective, it shouldn't be that way,
I don't think
because
we get as
that
good of
is
the
not
clones, though.
it's
I don't think
not
the clones
as
are as good without the chip,
but it's
because
not
they
as
can't have
well.
the
Yeah, well, it
relationship with the
affects
Jedi
them,
without
but
the chip.
the making it an order to blow up your own military is not as impactful as like egos and attitudes and all this stuff getting in the way to the point where they all go in and they're like, we're awesome, we're gonna beat this guy, and then they get murdered because they're not that good. That makes it more impactful for thinking that they're awesome. But anyway, Jordan, finish us off.
Sorry. With episode 3, we get to see the unification, though, between the trilogies. Everything comes to a head.
Yes.
Everything comes into, now we get Darth Vader in the suit, and we get the breathing and the no, which
Shouldn't have happened.
which we get the no scream, which is actually just his emotions through the Force being filtered because the suit didn't know how to process. He wasn't actually screaming no. Which you get in the novelization of episode 3.
That's stupid to me.
That's
It's just basically how the suit processes.
He's just screaming, and for some reason they turn it into no. Like, it's again, the no is not the most executed thing, but
That's
but
again, that's so
say,
dumb.
That's bad writing.
But
Bad writing, exactly.
when,
That's bad writing.
when the special editions came out and they had not Obi-Wan, when they had Vader say no when Palpatine's killing Luke, I do like that no. I actually
That would make
do.
sense. Interesting.
Yeah, like, because he's looking at Palpatine, he's looking at Luke, he's looking at Palpatine.
He makes his decision at that
he's
point.
like, no.
I like the first no. I like when he says it. He says it a couple times, right? Like, I like when he says it to himself. The last one I think is a little bit much, but
we get the unification, right? We also get the Wookiees. We get the
Kashyyyk.
Wookiees.
Yeah, Kashyyyk.
We get Kashyyyk. We get we get to see the connection with the Wookiees, but you get to see
Good
the
relations
expanded
with the Wookiees
universe.
I have.
You get to see Chewbacca for the first time, which brings it into the New Hope. I
Which
know
also
that was
was-
just more of a plug.
that doesn't make sense
That
to
was more
me.
just a plug.
it's-
but I get it. That was more fan service.
Well, that's
I'm okay
but
with
the
that.
whole, and that's a thing about the prequels is that especially episode 3, that movie is fan service the movie to get us to episode 4. That movie, and again from a filmmaking standpoint, would have been much better if you don't see Darth Vader in the suit, you don't name Luke and Leia, you don't know that Padme has 2 kids, you get to see Owen as a character that's not shitty. It's like, it would have, again, the ideas are there, but like showing Darth Vader in the suit, I'm thinking of this as if I was writing that movie and I wanted my kids to watch Star Wars episodes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in that order. I would never.
I can see it from
but
that
it
angle, yes,
eliminates, if you show Anakin as Darth Vader in the suit and you name Luke and Leia at the end of the movie, if you're watching them in order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Isn't him in the suit the consequence though? Like, in a way.
Yes, but
like,
if you're,
at
but
least
I'm
one of them-
thinking all of this leads up to that totally destroys the entire impact of the twist
I will say,
that Darth Vader is.
So we see that
the suit
Julian
is ready.
does-
The suit is kind of ready, I will say.
But then if you're watching, but I'm thinking if you watch episodes 1, 2, 3, and then you watch 4 and 5, you get to 5, I'm your father, it's not impactful because you already know it.
Well, that's why you gotta watch him as.
That's why you have to watch
I
them in
think you
release
watch-
order.
yeah,
And I think that's the
That's
point.
the way you're supposed
That's
to
the
watch
best
it.
way to do it, but as a good filmmaker and a good writer, you have to understand that people are going to watch them in order, sequence 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You should write it in a way
Well,
that
not
the
anymore.
but they should be written, and this is why I say it's partially on George Lucas and not just the fandom, is that you should write it in a way that the greatest twist in cinematic history of all time ever is still the greatest twist in cinematic history, and he writes it in a way that it totally diminishes the effect.
So
I will say, like, yeah, you can go, actually.
I was
Jordan,
just
go
gonna
ahead.
say that we really get a whole unification, and we get to the point now where Star Wars at this time, before your base Skywalker saga is completed.
Yeah.
It's all connected. We get the chessboard's finally set.
Yeah.
And now when we get the expanded stuff, we get Solo and all those other things, and Rogue
Yeah.
One, they all make sense. Everything, I mean, Solo is his own
Kind of
thing,
Solo.
but
Rogue One's a great
A
movie.
great movie.
Rogue One now
Best visual effects in all of Star Wars.
amazing. But so now it all makes sense though. We get the first Death Star plans in episode 2. We get to see
get
in
to see
number
the Death
3.
Star.
You get to see it getting started. You get to see the more addition to it in the Kenobi series.
Yeah.
And
Andor.
Andor,
Andor a little bit,
and you see how much presence the Empire has. You see how much power and everything that Palpatine's been manipulating through everything. And we get to the point now where it all just starts to make sense, connecting everything. You see how, yes, the Force was scientific, and then with this eradication of the Jedi with Order 66, how it's become more mystic, and it becomes more science fantasy rather than science fiction.
I would say the mysticism of the Jedi, especially in the sequels, always takes me out of it a little bit because they were like they're too in mythology in the eyes of like most of the people that seem to interact and remember the Jedi. It's only been 20 years.
20 years. The
Jedi
should
that
not
was
be
something
as-
that's always kind of rubbed me. But again, it is a big galaxy with billions of people,
But it's a
trillions of
whole
beings,
generation,
so.
and how many people actually get to encounter
And again,
Jedi?
most people don't. There was only 10,000 Jedi in the first place. So even though they were these legendary beings, the odds that you actually ever saw a Jedi, you ever
was
even
rare.
witnessed
I
the
like in
Force,
episode
Unless you lived on
Like-
Coruscant, you didn't.
Yeah,
hang
you
out
lived
with
on
Jedis.
Coruscant.
I like
maybe
in
they
episode
did.
4 how he says that it's an old religion. Like he's
Yeah.
not discounting
Yeah,
that it
it's- yeah,
didn't happen. He's just saying like it's not really prominent
it's not
anymore.
relevant anymore.
Yeah.
But-
And he's easing them into the idea of
Which
what
is
the
like
Jedi
the
are as
sequels.
well,
They're like
so.
Luke Skywalker's a myth, and it's like it's only been 20
Yeah,
years,
that one-
dude.
that one
he
especially-
led the rebellion. He
We
should be
have
like a
video
war
evidence
hero.
of them blowing up the Death
But here's
Star.
the
Because that
thing, too,
history
guys.
would be important.
Here's
This
the
isn't
thing.
like the rebellion falling to an empire. This is the rebellion.
We're talking
won,
about
so.
20 years and 20 Earth years rather than the time relation that is the Star Wars galaxy. We're talking, okay, it's been 20 years since the Battle of Yavin, not 20 years since the fall of the Republic. Or we're talking about it in 20 years as a calendar year on Earth. It doesn't make sense that way when you have to put down there the fact that the galaxy spins at different rates of speed.
Yeah, but they don't.
But that's more science. I'm not getting into that.
But that's taking it too far.
Yeah.
I think to
Especially because like Star Wars
try
doesn't
to come up.
always
That's like
exist in
trying
that,
to.
like,
That's
way.
trying to explain. But this is what I say, and this is why they do this a lot in Clone Wars, which I love. Clone Wars, greatest TV show, but they do this a lot with writing and stuff like that. Is that's them trying to explain away mistakes that don't make sense. And it's like, okay, we get it. For us, just because time passes differently on a different planet doesn't mean they live in a universe where they can call each other across planets via hologram. There is no way that people don't know this stuff. And it's
But my question is, where are they basing it? Are they basing it off of the rotation, 1 year, one rotation?
I think there's a
around the
standard.
galaxy?
But if you're-
standard, isn't there?
but there
Isn't
shouldn't
there
be
is.
but
There's
it
gotta be, like, a
shouldn't even be
standard
that
public
shouldn't
one.
even be a question to me.
Yeah.
It's like
That's just my ignorance.
you just have
I
to
know there's a way.
You just have to assume, because they don't canonically, if you watch the movies, they don't explain that time works differently on different planets. So
Yeah.
you have to assume that it all passes the same everywhere.
Yeah, I've always gotten
How
that
would they?
vibe.
Yeah. Anyway,
Even
So-
though they have said in different things, like it takes
Listen,
30 hours for a rotation. They've
we
said
really,
that in things.
we
but-
really could sit here and talk about
yeah, we could argue about it.
Yeah,
all
we're in
day.
the weeds
every
a little
film
bit,
for hours, but the cliff notes here. Episode 2 is the best.
No.
No, I'm kidding. We have toxic fandom.
Yes.
We acknowledge this, that
Yeah,
we need to
still
correct
to
it.
this day, it's
We
still a
have what Julian calls the mismanagement
Yes.
of
Yeah, that's exactly
production
what it is.
across
Yeah,
the
that's-
prequels.
Production and writing. The creative was mismanaged.
We have a great premise of the story. My introduction to the Star Wars universe as a whole,
My favorite era.
and we get
Yeah,
it's my
it's a
favorite
great
era
era.
is aesthetic, and that's
Yeah,
mainly due to all the video games I've played.
it's
Yeah,
it's a
but,
great era. And I'd like to see them expand on that a little bit more. Maybe do like a
Acolyte.
Plo Koon episode,
Yeah.
Acolyte, stuff like that. That leads up to that.
Yeah, that's the
Um,
most detailed
but
era we got too.
Today, I want to thank you guys for coming and talking about this with us, and coming and thanking y'all for listening and or watching us today on our YouTube channel, which is the 716th Attack Legion,
and or get it. Sorry.
and or yes, we got you can hit us up on multiple platforms. We got Spotify, we have Apple Podcasts, YouTube. I know I'm forgetting a couple. But we're out there in the galaxy on the HoloNet. So like, share, subscribe. Yep. And next episode we're gonna be delving a little bit deeper into the expanded universe with Rogue One.
Yes.
And Solo and
Some of the shows,
Clone
right?
Wars and stuff
Andor,
like that.
that kind of
so again, though, I want to thank Emerge Studios for allowing us to record our podcast.
Thanks,
here.
Rich.
Thank you.
And we want to
Sorry we
continually.
upset you about Star Trek.
Yes, we love the whales.
So bad.
Love the whales. And again, thank you for allowing us to record here and Moranto Media. We greatly appreciate you guys, and we'll see you guys next time.
And let us know in the comments which prequel is your favorite and why.
Oh
'Cause
yes,
I want to know what you think.
Yeah.
And may the force be with you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.